Jacksonville, Arkansas, was the kind of place where everything looked perfect on the surface. Rows of quiet homes with white fences, clean sidewalks, and front porches decorated for every season. Neighbors waved, dogs barked lazily in the afternoon. Heat, and nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Or at least, that's what people liked to believe. Beneath the surface, though, some homes hid secrets darker than anyone could imagine. The Cooper family had only moved into town 3 years ago. But they settled in quickly. Julia Cooper, a nurse at the local hospital, had just remarried. Her new husband, Andrew Miller, was well-liked. He was handy, polite, and always willing to lend a hand with community projects. He ran a small carpentry business, building decks and cabinets for homes around the area. To everyone who met him, Andrew was the kind of man any woman would be lucky to marry. He looked after Julia's daughter, Mia, like she was his own, or so people thought. Mia was 15 years old, quiet, and artistic. She kept to herself, spent hours drawing in her notebooks, and rarely caused trouble. Teachers said she was smart, but withdrawn. At church, she barely spoke to other kids, always standing a step behind her mother. Julia often said her daughter had been that way since childhood, shy and sensitive. But those who paid close attention noticed a change after Andrew entered their lives. Mia, once merely quiet, became distant. Her smile faded. She no longer brought home sketchbooks to share with her mother. Instead, she seemed to disappear more and more into herself. At first, Julia didn't see it. Between long hospital shifts and trying to keep the household running, she was exhausted most days. She believed Andrew when he said Mia was just going through a phase. "Teenagers are moody," he'd say with a calm voice and a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You were like that once too." Julia wanted to believe him. She didn't want to think something might be wrong under her own roof. The neighbors didn't see anything unusual either. From the outside, the Cooper family looked like any other. They attended Sunday service. They hosted a barbecue in the summer. They even took family photos. Julia's phone was full of them. Smiling selfies in the backyard, Mia blowing out birthday candles, Andrew holding Julia close as fireworks lit the sky. But none of those photos showed what was really happening behind the doors of their 2-story home. The signs were there. Mia started refusing to go on family outings. She locked her bedroom door at night. She flinched when Andrew entered the room. Julia, overwhelmed and tired, chalked it all up to growing pains. She loved her husband, and she trusted him. She couldn't imagine he'd ever hurt her daughter. Then came the nausea, the fatigue, the missed periods. Mia stayed silent through it all. She didn't ask for help. She didn't tell anyone. Because deep down, she knew no one would believe her. By the time Julia noticed the physical changes in her daughter, it was too late. Mia was already in the 2nd trimester. And that was when the cracks began to show in the perfect image of the Cooper family. Julia's questions turned sharp. Her instincts, long dulled by routine and exhaustion, began to scream. But Mia wouldn't talk. She just stared ahead, eyes hollow, lips sealed. Julia thought the worst part was not knowing. But the truth was far more terrifying than her imagination could ever reach. After the hospital visit, everything changed. Julia sat in the sterile waiting room, stunned by the news. Her daughter was 4 months pregnant. The words echoed in her ears, but they didn't feel real. She had always assumed Mia was still just a child, too young, too quiet, too guarded to even think about boys. The idea of her being pregnant felt like something from someone else's life, not her own. Julia tried to ask questions, but Mia refused to say a word. She kept her head down, her eyes distant, her hands trembling in her lap. Nothing made sense. When the doctor gently asked if Julia knew who the father was, all she could do was shake her head. Panic gripped her chest. She went home with Mia that night, hoping the privacy of their home would allow for a conversation. But Mia barely ate. She went straight to her room and locked the door. Julia sat outside that door for hours, pleading, whispering, trying to make sense of it all. But not a sound came back. At school, word spread quickly. The small town had a way of turning rumors into facts. Whispers followed Mia through the hallways. Some kids mocked her. Others just stared. Teachers noticed her slipping further away, both mentally and emotionally. One teacher called Julia concerned. Another called Child Protective Services. Investigators were sent and an official case was opened. But still, Mia wouldn't speak. Not to police, not to social workers, not even to the therapist who was assigned to her. Then, suddenly, Mia vanished. It happened in the middle of the night. Julia had fallen asleep on the couch, drained by worry and confusion. When she woke up and checked Mia's room, it was empty. The window was open. Her shoes were gone, so was her backpack. Julia called the police in a panic. A search was launched immediately, combing through neighborhoods, nearby woods, and abandoned buildings. Julia was questioned again. Who had Mia been talking to? Was she seeing someone? Was there a boyfriend? She didn't know. No one did. 2 days later, Mia was found in an abandoned trailer on the edge of town. She was cold, scared, dehydrated, and still wouldn't speak. She refused to go home. Social services placed her in emergency foster care. Julia was heartbroken. Her daughter was alive, but she felt more distant than ever. Then the notebook was found. It was tucked inside Mia's backpack, almost overlooked. On the last page, scrawled in a shaky hand, were 7 words that shifted the entire investigation. Asterisk. He said no one would believe me. That sentence turned suspicion into urgency. Julia read the line over and over, her heart pounding in her ears. Something terrible had happened, and now there was no denying it. A paternity test was ordered. Julia cooperated fully. Mia had to be persuaded, gently, by professionals who assured her it was the only way to uncover the truth. Weeks passed. The waiting was unbearable. Julia barely slept. She looked at every man around her with suspicion, even strangers on the street. But there was one person she refused to suspect, until the results came in. One envelope changed everything. The name on the report was clear: Andrew Miller, her husband. The man she had trusted with her daughter. The man she had invited into their lives. The father of her unborn grandchild. Julia fell to the floor when she saw the result. The truth didn't just break her, it hollowed her out from the inside. 100 memories crashed down at once. Mia's silence, her fear. The way she flinched when Andrew got too close. Julia had missed every sign. And now, her daughter had been violated. Her trust destroyed, and the man she shared her bed with was at the center of it all. The days following the DNA test felt like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. Julia sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the report in her hand, still hoping the words would change. But they never did. Andrew Miller, her husband, was the father of Mia's unborn child. The man she had built a life with had been violating her daughter under her very nose. Julia's world cracked open. Her thoughts spiraled between disbelief, rage, shame, and unbearable guilt. How could she have missed it? How could she have trusted him? Andrew was arrested that same day. The police arrived at his workshop, and within minutes, the man Julia once loved was in handcuffs. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He just lowered his head like someone who knew the game was up. The neighbors watched in silence as he was led to the patrol car. Rumors exploded across town like wildfire. The friendly carpenter, the devoted stepfather now exposed as a predator. Back at the station, investigators dug deeper. They examined Andrew's phone, emails, and hidden files on his computer. What they found was damning. Deleted texts, secret messages, encrypted photos. Even more chilling was a string of voice recordings, disguised under generic file names. One of them captured Mia crying softly, begging someone to stop. It was enough to silence even the most skeptical voices. There was no misunderstanding now. Andrew wasn't just guilty, he was a monster. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Andrew refused to confess. He claimed the results were fabricated, the evidence planted. He accused Julia of turning Mia against him. But no one believed his lies anymore. He was denied bail and placed in solitary confinement due to the nature of his crimes. The courtroom would be his next stop, but it wouldn't be for months. Meanwhile, Julia was left to pick up the shattered pieces of her family. She moved out of their home and into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. She couldn't bear to walk past Mia's bedroom. She couldn't stand to sleep in the bed she once shared with the man who destroyed everything. Every reflection in the mirror reminded her of her failure as a mother. She had brought this man into their lives. She had trusted him, defended him, loved him. Julia tried to reconnect with Mia, who was still under protective care. Therapists and caseworkers were involved now, and every interaction was supervised. Julia brought her daughter gifts, wrote her letters, and begged for forgiveness. But Mia remained guarded. She spoke in clipped sentences, her eyes clouded with trauma. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. The stress took a toll on Julia's mental health. She stopped going to work. She stopped answering her phone. She became a ghost in the town she used to proudly walk through. Her days blurred together, filled with regret and self-loathing. The guilt consumed her. Every memory of Andrew felt like a betrayal, every kiss, every hug, every word of affection. She began to feel as if she had betrayed Mia just as much as he had, by failing to see, by failing to protect. Then, out of nowhere, Julia requested a visit with Andrew in jail. Guards were surprised. No one expected it. The visit lasted just 10 minutes. No one knows what was said during that conversation. There were no recordings, no witnesses beyond a single guard stationed near the door. When she left the jail, Julia looked eerily calm-like. Someone who had made up her mind. Later that night, she visited Mia one last time. She brought a small suitcase, told the caseworker they were taking a short trip to clear their heads, and promised to return the next morning. Permission was granted. No one suspected what Julia was planning. Not then. Not until it was too late. The drive to the cabin was long and silent. Mia stared out the window, her face expressionless, her body tense. Julia drove with both hands on the wheel, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, barely blinking. The air between them was heavy, like neither of them could find the right words. Julia had rented the cabin under a fake name 2 days before. It was tucked deep into the woods, far from the main roads and neighbors. No one knew they were going there. That was the plan. When they arrived, the cabin was cold and dusty. Julia unpacked a few things, set up blankets, and made some food, though neither of them ate much. Outside, the woods were eerily quiet. Inside, time felt like it had stopped. Mia curled up on the couch, her body wrapped in a blanket, her eyes watching Julia's every move. There was something different about her mother, something calm, almost detached. It wasn't the frantic worry Mia had seen in recent weeks. It was something colder. As night fell, Julia sat at the small kitchen table, staring at an old photo of the three of them. A birthday party from 2 years ago. Balloons, cake, smiles. Back when she still believed her family was whole. She placed the photo down, walked to her bag, and pulled out a handgun. It was registered under Andrew's name. Julia had taken it from a hidden compartment in his workshop before his arrest. No one knew she had it. No one would have guessed. She'd kept it all this time. At the jail that morning, Julia had looked Andrew in the eyes and told him something no one else would hear. She said she was going to make sure he never had the chance to hurt anyone again. And then, in her mind, she made a decision. If the justice system couldn't give Mia peace, she would deliver it herself. While Mia slept on the couch, Julia stepped Outside, phone in hand. She called the county jail, requesting to speak to the night supervisor. Her voice was calm, polite. She asked about Andrew's schedule. Was he still being held in solitary? When was his next transfer? She said she was trying to prepare paperwork for court. The supervisor, unaware of her mental state, answered without concern. Julia thanked him and ended the call. Hours later, Andrew Miller was found dead in his jail cell. He had been stabbed repeatedly with a sharpened spoon handle. His throat was slashed, and he had bled out before guards could reach him. The murder stunned the entire facility. There were no signs of forced entry. No cameras showed a visitor entering his block. No staff members reported hearing anything unusual. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. Investigators would later theorize that Julia had paid someone inside, possibly another inmate or a guard. But no one ever confessed. Back at the cabin, the morning sun crept through the trees. A delivery man found the bodies when he arrived with groceries ordered days before. The scene was quiet. Too quiet. Mia was found in the living room, a single gunshot wound to her chest. She was wrapped in the same blanket she'd slept in. Julia was nearby, lying on the floor, the handgun beside her and a self-inflicted wound to the head. A note was found in Julia's handwriting. It read, *, I couldn't protect her then. But I can now. I've set her free. And I'm coming with her. *. The news spread like wildfire. A mother who murdered her daughter and then herself just after her husband was killed in jail. 3 lives gone, a town left in shock, and a silence that still hangs over those woods to this day. The aftermath of the tragedy sent shockwaves through Jacksonville and far beyond. News outlets across the country seized on the horrific story. A mother who discovered her husband had impregnated her teenage daughter, only to murder both him and the girl before taking her own life. People were stunned by the cruelty, confused by the motive, and divided in their judgment of Julia Cooper. Was she a monster? A grieving mother? A failed protector? The debate tore through the media, online forums, and even within the town itself. Investigators launched a full-scale review of the events. Every detail of the days leading up to the deaths was scrutinized. The cabin was sealed off, and forensic teams combed through every inch. Surveillance footage from local gas stations confirmed Julia's route. She had paid in cash, left no digital trace, and even turned off her phone during the final leg of the trip. She had planned the entire thing with chilling precision. There was no panic, no hesitation. Only resolve. At the jail, the death of Andrew Miller was an even greater mystery. The facility's security log showed no unauthorized entries. No inmates reported anything suspicious, and the weapon used a sharpened piece of metal seemed to come from nowhere. The wounds were deep, clean, and deliberate. Whoever had killed him had done it swiftly and with skill. Some believed Julia had found a way to infiltrate the jail herself. Others suggested she had bribed someone on the inside. But no evidence ever surfaced to prove either theory. In the weeks that followed, new information came to light. Julia's internet search history revealed months of torment. She had researched abuse recovery, revenge laws, and cases of mothers who killed child abusers. She had visited forums where survivors shared stories of their children being hurt by people they trusted. She had even looked up how to disappear without leaving a trace. It became clear that her mind had been unraveling long before she acted. Most heartbreaking discovery, however, was found in Mia's sketchbook. Hidden between 2 pages, taped to the inside of the cover, was a letter she had written but never sent. It was addressed simply, to anyone who finds this. In it, Mia wrote that she had been hurt for months, that she had been too scared to speak, and that she felt trapped in her own home. She wrote that she didn't know what love was supposed to feel like anymore, and that she often wished she could go back to being invisible. The final line read, asterisk, I just want it all to stop. Asterisk psychologists weighed in, calling the case a textbook example of generational trauma, unresolved grief, and a system that failed everyone involved. Child services were criticized for missing red flags. The school district came under fire for not pushing harder when Mia began to change. And many questioned how Julia had managed to hide her growing instability from everyone, including professionals and friends. A small memorial was held in the local church for Mia. Only a few people attended. Her name was barely spoken after that. Julia and Andrew were buried in separate cemeteries, at the request of both families. No markers. No headstones. Over time, the Cooper home was sold to a couple from out of state. They painted over the walls, planted flowers, and tried to erase what had happened there. But some neighbors say the house still feels cold. Like something lingers. Jacksonville never really healed. The tragedy became a cautionary tale, a story whispered behind closed doors. It reminded people that evil doesn't always come from strangers. And that sometimes, the ones who smile the most are the ones hiding the darkest truths. And perhaps most haunting of all, it showed how silence can destroy lives. Not just one, but three.